Good afternoon. I'm joined by Minister of Health Shandro and Dr. Laura McDougall, who is the Senior Medical Officer of Health for AHS. I'd like to make a statement about serious emerging developments, all of which pose major challenges to Alberta and to Canada. First, and most importantly, I will address the public health challenge posed by the coronavirus or COVID-19. I will then speak to what appears to be an increasingly severe global economic downturn and today's related collapse in energy prices. As you know, earlier today, the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, gave an update in which she confirmed 3 new cases of the novel coronavirus in Alberta, bringing Alberta to 7 confirmed or presumptive cases of infection. All 7 of these cases involve people who returned to Alberta from recent cruise ships or those who have been in contact with recent cruise ship passengers. All of these individuals are now in isolation, and public health officials continue to reach out to anyone with whom they may have been in close contact. I want to thank our tremendous public health officials, including Dr. McDougall, for their hard work and their tremendous professionalism. They have increased the number of COVID tests being processed this week to 1,000, while getting assessment centres up and running, expanding capacity at 811 HealthLink, and tracing contacts of cases. In some instances, tracing contacts of individual cases has taken hundreds of hours of work. It is exactly through this kind of meticulous work that we have the best chance of containing the spread of the virus here in Alberta. While our public health experts continue to rate the chances of contracting the coronavirus in Alberta as being low, the virus continues to spread globally, so all Albertans should be vigilant. That means we all have to be more careful about basic hygiene, and the advice of public health experts that they are giving us, including frequently washing your hands with soap and hot water, and I'm told for about 30 seconds, Doctor, avoiding touching your face whenever possible, avoid the spread of germs by coughing into your elbow or your arm, avoid shaking hands with other people, call 811 if you've been exhibiting symptoms of the coronavirus, stay home if possible if you have cold or flu symptoms, isolate yourself if you've recently returned from traveling abroad and are not feeling well, avoid being in crowded spaces if possible, and finally, please be very mindful of the health of elderly people, especially those with pre-existing respiratory conditions. On the latter point, the Department of Health and Alberta Health Services are reaching out to seniors' homes and continuing care facilities to strengthen plans to help keep our seniors safe. We ask people who are not feeling well to avoid visiting seniors' residences. I can assure Albertans that this province is well prepared for a public health challenge of this nature. The government has a detailed pandemic influenza plan, which has been subject to successful exercise as recently as last year as part of ongoing emergency preparedness activities. The Alberta Emergency Management Agency is overseen by Deputy Minister Paul Winnick, who recently joined the Government of Alberta after having served as Commander of the Canadian Army and Vice Chief of Defence Staff. The agency has been working closely with Alberta Health, Alberta Health Services, and our partners around the province since January to monitor the global situation and ensure our readiness. The fact that Alberta has been through major emergencies in recent years, such as floods and fires, means that there is a high degree of interagency and intergovernmental cooperation, which is key at a time like this, as is the fact that we have a single integrated healthcare agency in AHS. So these are all strengths in our ability to address this challenge. To be clear, we will ensure that our public health professionals have the resources that they need to contain and, if necessary, to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus. We are working closely with the federal government and other provinces on sharing information and accessing supplies, in part to ensure that our medical professionals have the personal protection gear that they need. The Department of Health has been regularly briefing my office and Cabinet on the situation and our plan, even before we saw any cases emerge in Alberta. Our government has just created a new Emergency Management Committee of the Provincial Cabinet, which will be meeting for the first time this afternoon, during which time we will be briefed by health officials. The Emergency Management Committee We'll also discuss the emergence of what appears to be a global coronavirus-linked recession and the collapse in energy prices and markets. The challenge posed to this province and to Canada could not be more serious. This is not just about Alberta. Energy is the single largest subsector of the entire Canadian national economy. It is by far Canada's largest export industry. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians depend on the energy sector directly for their livelihoods, and all 36 million Canadians benefit from it, at least indirectly. The coronavirus has caused the global economy to slow down, and with it, demand for energy to decline for the first time in over a decade. And this led to conversations between the OPEC cartel and the Russian government on curtailment of production to reflect declining demand. However, as you know, last Friday those conversations broke down after several years of cooperation between Russia and OPEC. This has resulted in the Saudi government in particular deciding to significantly increase oil supply in the face of a significant decline in demand. I understand this is the first time since 1930 that the world has seen a significant decline in energy demand met concurrently with a significant increase in energy supply. We are in uncharted territory, and so we have seen a precipitous decline in the price of global oil. Particularly, what affects us here is the price for West Texas Intermediate and Western Canadian Select Energy. This could hardly come at a worse time after 5 years of economic decline and stagnation in our province. Economic fragility, combined with a global recession and a collapse in prices, constitutes a profound challenge for Alberta and for Canada. This will obviously be a very difficult time for everyone in our energy sector and will affect the broader Alberta economy. I've been speaking to energy sector experts throughout the weekend and today. Tomorrow, I and members of our cabinet will meet with top industry leaders. Thankfully, our energy producers are more efficient, more resilient, and more innovative than they've ever been. Their cost of production has gone down significantly in the past 5 years, and their balance sheets generally have improved as they have paid down debt and bought back shares. They are better prepared, perhaps, than they've ever been to get through a challenging time such as this. There is some midterm optimism in the sector that the price war between the Saudis and the Russians will result in a significant decline in U.S. shale oil production in the Permian Basin and elsewhere south of the border, and that this will open up an opportunity for Canada to increase its North American market share and access to capital. But obviously, in the short term, there will be some very real challenges with a reduction in capital spending in this province. And we cannot predict how deeply or for how long this devastating price collapse or the global coronavirus recession will affect us. But I want to remind Albertans that we are resilient. We've gotten through bigger challenges in the past, and we'll get through this one together. Let me be clear. The government of Alberta will do everything within its power to protect people from the effects of this price collapse and this global downturn. Last week, we saw monetary stimulus coming from the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of Canada, both of which reduced their key lending rates by 500 basis points. And here in Alberta, we are adding to that with significant fiscal stimulus to help to save and create jobs. We did so outlined through our Blueprint for Jobs released a week ago today. We did so through last Friday's announcement of a near record $7 billion investment in infrastructure spending this year in 2020 to get people to work. We did it with our announcement of a $100 million loan to the Orphan Well Association to accelerate well reclamation to get blue-collar people in the oil field service sector back to work. We're doing it. We will continue to do it through stimulative tax relief and by reducing the red tape burden to make Alberta more competitive both in the short to long term. Later this week, I will be traveling to Ottawa, and I will present to the Government of Canada and the Prime Minister several actions that are urgently needed to help to protect our economy from the price collapse and the global downturn. And I'm sure that many, if not all, of my provincial and territorial counterparts will join with me in that call as we lead up to the federal budget at the end of this month. Our Finance Minister, Travis Toews, has been speaking with Federal Finance Minister Morneau about these issues today. And I have instructed officials and ministers in our government urgently to develop other proposals that could help to counteract this downturn, both through federal action and by action by the Government of Alberta. That may include further acceleration of infrastructure spending. All options will be on the table. I repeat, all options will be on the table to do everything that we can within our capacity to help to protect jobs and Albertans. I will be appointing an urgent Economic Advisory Committee to be chaired by Dr. Jack Mintz to provide expert external advice on how to meet the challenge of this downturn. Dr. Mintz is an Albertan, born and raised in Edmonton. He's one of the most highly regarded public economists in the country, former president of the C.D. Howe Institute, founding president of the University of Calgary School of Public Policy, who understands both public finance as well as energy markets. And we will be announcing the full membership of that expert panel later this week. So we will do everything within our power to get this province through this downturn. We should not, however, allow these challenges to undermine our fundamental optimism as Albertans. The fundamentals are with us. We have the youngest and best educated and most productive population in the country. Our economy is more diversified now than it has ever been through Alberta's modern economic history. And when the price war is over, the world will continue to need a stable, secure supply of energy for decades to come. And so, for now, we all have to come together, united as Albertans and as Canadians, to get through this time with resolve and with strength. Happy to take your questions.
You said everything is on the table. Is your budget on the table? That is to say, you have a date to balance the books, you have a plan to reduce spending by a certain amount over 3 years. Just taking those two things, are those on the table as well? Is that part of what on the table means?
Well, the fiscal plan is obviously going to be affected by these massive developments in the global economy and in energy prices. We intend to pass the budget that was introduced in the legislature 2 weeks ago. We're just 3 weeks from the beginning of the fiscal year, and so we need the legislature to approve our spending plans, and we will see what the federal government, how the federal government responds to this very serious challenge. And at some point, we'll come back with an update once we've had a chance to get a better assessment of where we're headed midterm in terms of both energy prices and economic growth. The point I would make is this. Our priority is protecting jobs. Our priority is protecting the economy. And if that means that in the midterm, we need to borrow money to help make that happen, we will do so. Our goal has always been to balance the budget in our first term of government. I was always clear, however, that if we were sideswiped by a major global economic downturn, that could be put at risk. We are being sideswiped by a major global economic downturn. And we will deal with that challenge because at the end of the day, this economy is already very fragile. There are already many Alberta households and businesses that are leveraged to the max. And that is why we'll be looking at doing everything we can to help those folks get through this challenging time, even if that means that even if it means we have to make adjustments to the fiscal plan in the midterm.
And that just so I'm clear, that includes the two things I was saying is originally you had a plan, I think it was 2.5, 2.8, whatever, over 3 years. Can that change? And the second one was your budget balance.
On your first question,
So you're going to still keep cutting spending as much as you...
On your first question, I think it's still incumbent on the government sector in Alberta to learn to operate at least as efficiently as other provincial governments in Canada, because when we come out on the other side of this thing, we will need to bring fiscal health back to this province. And so we will continue to challenge our excellent public servants and the government sector to operate over time at least as efficiently, as Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. So we do not have plans to change the very modest operational spending constraints of 2.8% spread over 4 years. In fact, what we will be doing is looking at spending that can immediately have an impact on the economy to mitigate this global downturn. So that may mean potentially additional capital infrastructure spending to get people back to work in the private sector right now. So we will be assessing all of our options. Today, it's too early for us to map out a plan because this collapse in oil prices has happened just in the last 24 hours, and the acceleration of the global downturn instigated by the coronavirus is really only taken hold in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Premier, what exactly are you going to be asking Ottawa for? As far as you said, you've got your ministers on it, so what are you looking for?
Sure. So we've already, I would refer you back to our priority requests of the national government that we tabled last December during our Team Alberta trip to Ottawa. In addition to that, we've made a number of other suggestions. One of those general requests was the federal government invest in job creation projects here, such as, for example, allowing for flow-through shares to allow the private sector to accelerate oil well reclamation and completion to get the oil field service sector back to work while reducing an environmental liability. Another proposal was simply cash subsidies to help accelerate well reclamation, as we've done indirectly through our loans to the Orphan Well Association. There could be additional tax measures that we have proposed, including potential flow-through shares, to increase investment in green and energy technology, such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and related technologies to help reduce carbon intensity and help to prepare for easier access to capital for the energy sector when we come through this price downturn. But I think in the short term, we'll also be looking at potential support for businesses in terms of payroll taxes. I note that the government of Japan, in light of the coronavirus recession, has just announced a series of measures in that regard. So we are working on a revised list of requests to the federal government that we'll finalize over the next 48 hours, and I'll be taking with me to Ottawa on Thursday.
And just as a follow-up, what concerns do you have that that list is going to be met, you know, with open arms, given that tensions have been so high? Well,
I've had, I think, constructive discussions with Deputy Prime Minister Freeland on these issues. The federal government has said that it understands that Alberta has played a disproportionately large role in national prosperity in recent decades, and that we are hurting right now, and that there is a need to respond to that. And I would remind you that we are not alone in this. We have all 13 provinces and territories who have called for a retroactive lifting of the arbitrary federal cap on the fiscal stabilization program. That would return about $2.6 billion to Alberta to help us pay for some of these job creation programs that we will be rolling out in the months to come. All 13 provinces and territories have agreed to that, and that is something I will be reminding them. That's actually officially on the agenda for the first ministers' meeting in Ottawa on Friday. And, of course, we will continue to demand that the cap be lifted in the future. If we end up losing billions of dollars of revenue, that would become a very material need on the part of this province. Here's the point. Albertans, even in our times of economic trial, have been contributing $20 billion net to the rest of the Federation through our federal taxes. Our ability to continue doing so is now at risk. Albertans have been good to the rest of Canada. It's time to see the rest of Canada return the favor. I'll come back to French at the end if you don't mind. Sorry.
There's this perpetual debate in Alberta. Do we have a spending problem? Do we have a revenue problem? This is a collapse in revenue. So is it finally time to look at that side of the ledger in terms of policy, whatever that looks like?
You know, I cannot imagine a dumber thing to do in the midst of a time of economic fragility, a oil price collapse, and a global recession than to add a multi-billion-dollar tax on the Alberta economy, on Alberta families. That would cost, you know, you're talking about a PST that would generate several $billion of revenue. That would take several $1,000s out of the pockets of Alberta families at the worst possible time. What we need now is fiscal stimulus, not fiscal suppression of economic growth and disposable income. So, look, we're always going to have a debate in this province about tax policy, and in fact, our government ran on a commitment in the latter part of this term to appoint a commission to advise us on the most efficient tax system for Alberta. So we'll continue to have a debate about that. But at least this government is not going to take thousands of dollars out of people's household budgets at a time of real economic challenge.
And the things that you just outlined in terms of asking for the federal government, fiscal stabilization is the big one. Those are things that you were already asking about before this, latest calamity this past couple of weeks. What else do you need?
So we're putting more definition on how the federal government could help with investments to create jobs here. In fact, our Deputy Minister of Finance did that in a letter to her counterpart last Friday. Obviously, circumstances have become a whole lot more grave in the ensuing 3 days. So we're working on a more robust request for action to the federal government. Let's be clear. This is not just about Alberta. As Alberta goes, so goes the national economy. And I will remind our friends across the Federation that Canada got through the global financial crisis in 2008-9 better than virtually any major developed country, in large part because of dynamic growth in the Alberta energy sector that generated jobs, revenue, and growth right across the country. So this region's economy has often been a counterbalance to conventional global recessions affecting our manufacturing and other sectors across the country. The opposite is true. When we see a deep and prolonged trough in the Alberta energy sector, it affects the rest of Canada. You can bet your bottom dollar that right now, senior federal department finance officials in Ottawa are recalculating the budget that they're preparing because of declining revenues as a result of this price collapse in oil. Declining corporate tax revenues, personal tax revenues, GST, et cetera. So, and they'll be changing their employment projections and everything else. So I guess my point is we're not asking for a handout. We're not asking for any special favors. I assume that this federal government intends to act to protect the Canadian economy against the effects of both a major global economic downturn, but also the price collapse, which will affect working women and men from coast to coast.
Premier, to what extent would you be willing to work with the opposition in working out solutions? You mentioned this is uncharted territory, this is a dire situation. Would you sit down with the NDP to
yes.
their ideas?
I mentioned in my statement the importance of unity. Last Friday on social media, I said when the news came out of Vienna about the collapse of the OPEC conversations, the OPEC negotiations, I said that we need to work together. And by that I meant we need to work together across the country, federal and provincial governments, and we need to work together as Albertans across our partisan or political differences. So I absolutely do intend to reach out to the Leader of the Opposition, Ms. Notley, and perhaps some of the minor parties in Alberta as well, to seek their input. It is at moments like this when all of us who are in elected life need to try to park the politics and focus on one thing only, which is the vital economic interests and getting people, protecting people's jobs. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything, but this is not a time for partisan politics. This is a time for unity. This is a time for action. We intend to act.
What you just said about the follow-up. Would you be open to revisiting some of the tax incentives that the previous government had to try to diversify the economy beyond oil and gas into tech and what have you?
As I said, all options are on the table. So we're open to all sorts of ideas. And in fact, we have an expert panel on innovation policy, which will be reporting back to the government shortly, which is looking at incentives of that nature. Our view was that the Alberta Investment Tax Credit benefited only 160 businesses in Alberta in its 1 year of operation, whereas the job creation tax cut benefits 100,000 Alberta businesses. We think that's a much more powerful tool to stimulate economic diversification. But if there are targeted things that we can do to support continued growth in the information technology sector, we will certainly be open to that.
I think that
you had just mentioned the need for the federal government to be taking a look at its budget plan, but you also mentioned your government's going to continue with passing the budget, the provincial budget. Why not take another look back at that plan? Why not make changes to it?
Well, because first of all, the fiscal year ends in 3 weeks, so we need a budget passed by then. We need the legislature to authorize the spending of our government budget for the upcoming fiscal year that begins in 3 weeks. Secondly, it is too early to know or to predict the impact on our budget as a result of the global oil price collapse and the coronavirus recession. So to try to scramble and improvise and sort of make things up before we have adequate information would be, I think, hugely counterproductive. Thirdly, we expect that the forthcoming federal budget will have some hopefully positive impact on our fiscal situation. So for us to amend the budget before we even know where Ottawa is going on some of these issues would also be, I think, irresponsible. So as I said, I have tasked our public service and relevant ministers with coming forward with a series of policies to respond to this global economic downturn and the price collapse, to, in technical terms, counter-cyclical fiscal policies that create jobs. And we will, at an appropriate time, likely in the second quarter of this year, come forward with an economic update that includes revised fiscal projections as well as a package of additional measures to protect jobs in Alberta. But we're not going to scramble and improvise that overnight when we do not yet have adequate information.
Can you give us a specific example of a new action that you're strongly considering at this point to support the oil and gas sector in particular, given what's happened in the last 24 hours?
Well, as I've said, we just made a loan to the Orphan Well Association to help accelerate well reclamation that helps unemployed people in the oilfield service sector. We'll see if there's more that we can do in that respect. We're going to redouble our ask on Ottawa for flow-through shares. This is something that the Petroleum Services Association of Canada has asked for to incentivize the energy companies themselves to invest more in well reclamation. That would be a substitute for capital investment in the sector. Obviously, CapEx is going to be going down substantially as a result of the price collapse. Some kind of fiscal incentive, like a flow-through share, to reclaim and complete wells would help to keep some of our blue-collar oil field folks and their contracting companies back at work. As I intimated 2 weeks ago today, our government is prepared to make strategic investments in energy infrastructure to ensure the long-term future of our largest industry, and we'll be having an announcement about that to come at the end of this month. And we're looking at all sorts of other options. As I say, all other options are on the table, but it would be very helpful to have the federal government's cooperation.
Just as a follow-up to that, one of the concerns heard today is about production actually really dropping off now in Alberta because of costs at this price. Could you see Alberta, for example, directly subsidizing the cost of a barrel of oil produced in this province, or is that something that's not on the table?
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. All options are on the table. We're going to look at all ideas. We will take the advice of this new expert economic advisory panel chaired by Professor Mintz. We will receive ideas from, I'll be tomorrow meeting with senior leaders of the energy sector, including all of the major industry groups. We'll be taking on board their ideas, and we'll be receiving ideas from the public sector. So I'm not going to start excluding possible actions at this point. I said to my team earlier today that I recall back during the National Energy Program crisis 35 years ago, nearly 40 years ago, that there was a double whammy then because of double-digit interest rates, and hundreds of thousands of Albertans at that time were at risk of losing their homes. And the Lougheed government responded by bringing in a mortgage interest rate cap, a de facto subsidy, so people, and that helped hundreds of thousands of people to keep their homes. That situation is not precisely analogous to where we are today, but that is the scope of my imagination, our ambition in terms of trying to protect people from what is likely coming at us here. Okay, thank you very much, folks. I appreciate your questions. Oh, wait, and then I've got to do French as well.
I'm sorry, my colleague had to go.
Okay, en français, oui.
Her question was just basically your reaction to the events of today and what you intend to do.
Tout d'abord, j'aimerais renforcer les messages de nos officiels de santé publique qu'on a 7 cas de coronavirus en Alberta, et j'en renforce l'importance à pratiquer les normes de hygiène personnelle, d'éviter les grandes foules, de lever les mains et tout ça, parce que ça, c'est la meilleure façon de prévenir l'élargissement de ces cas d'infection. Sur la question économique, évidemment, dans les derniers jours, nous avons vu l'accélération d'une récession économique mondiale à cause du coronavirus. Et aujourd'hui, on a vu la chute énorme des prix de pétrole qui va toucher sérieusement l'économie de l'Alberta et celle du Canada. C'est la raison pour laquelle cet après-midi, nous aurons le premier entretien du nouveau comité du cabinet de l'Alberta pour les situations d'urgence. Je vais créer une nouvelle comité avisoire sur cette crise économique qui sera présidé par le professeur Jack Mintz. Et j'ai demandé auprès de mes ministres et la fonction publique de fournir les idées très urgentes pour protéger l'économie albertaine et les emplois en Alberta de cette situation grave. Ça comprend peut-être une accélération des dépenses pour l'infrastructure, comme nous avons déjà fait. Peut-être il y aura davantage. Nous avons donné une liste des propos au gouvernement fédéral plus tard cette semaine au Conseil des premiers ministres à Ottawa. Et je laisse toutes les options sur la table pour l'action économique urgente, et notre gouvernement est axé sur la protection des Albertains contre cette situation économique très sérieuse. Thanks very much.